So multiple times a year, it's the 3,000?
No, it's 3,000 spread out.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. That makes more sense. But per year. I think it's 3,000 spread out over the year, but per year. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
But does that make it optional? Like, it's not optional. Like, say if I don't want the 3,000, do I not have to pay?
Now, that's a great question. I don't know, and I will find out the answer. I think they've got to comply with your part of the bargain that's been made. They think they have to comply.
I'm going to try to tie a lot of this together because I was a police supervisor for 16 years in some of the toughest streets in America, Brownsville, Bed-Stuy, East New York, Far Rock. All right, and I was a supervisor for 16 years. My two brothers are cops. One's still in transit. They got 26, 27, 28 years on. My other brothers are Miami Beach cop. So they've seen both sides of the program, camera, no camera. So my brothers are wearing cameras. I think where you're gonna run into the problem, and maybe Carrie and yourself, I don't know who you are, so maybe you guys can tie this all together in one nice, neat little bundle with Ms. Curran is going to be what this gentleman said, the $8 million, the $3,000 per officer, and then when an incident happens, whether if we see that it exonerates the officer and it's released, if it implicates the officer potentially and it doesn't get released, people don't wonder, do I have to go out and get a freedom of information to get this video, or when is there going to be a policy that these videos are going to be released by a certain time, and that good, bad, or ugly, this is where it's at? See, that is going to be the sticky point
You're
here.
absolutely right. You're absolutely right, and that's a terrific question, because that is, when you take a look at all the incidents across the country, that's always the crux of the controversy, right? When are you going to release the video? So this is going to be done on a case-by-case basis. You say, well, why? It's going to be done on a case-by-case basis because you don't know what the investigation involves. You know, not everything happens as these officers can attest to. Not everything happens like it's on TV. You know, you have evidentiary requirements, you have discovery requirements, particularly under the new laws that they passed in Albany, that has very specific timelines for how you deal with evidence, including camera footage. And what you have, I'm going to give you just one example. You have multiple officers respond to a scene. Each one of them is wearing a camera. Each one of them will now surveil the scene. Each one of those videotapes has to be reviewed and then put into the chain of custody for the district attorney's office. The decision on when to release and in what cases to release will be made by the department under the guidance of the Attorney General's office, the Department of Justice, the Inspector General here in Nassau County. So there's a lot of oversight, and it's not like, you know, the commissioners, some emperor that says yay or nay on whether it's done. There's going to be an evaluation on a case-by-case basis to make sure that you don't compromise the investigation of that particular incident. Yes?
See, I understand what you're talking about. You know, I've been to CCOP and all that. I never had any complaints in my career, but I've been sometimes as a subject, or as a witness. So what I'm saying is, what you're saying, I understand. I understand this. Testifying court, I understand all this. But what that gentleman is saying is there anybody that this buck stops with, that if it's Letitia James or whether it's Governor Cuomo, can we say who that person is definitively, that if there is a problem with a video and someone says, who does this buck stop with, can we identify who that person is?
So ultimately, it is the Attorney General.
Okay.
Not oversight. Department of Justice.
That's what most people want to know.
Yeah.
That if they
There will be an oversight. Again, the commissioner will not make these decisions by themselves or in a vacuum. But it will. But there's no policy that's going to say, all right, in every case we're going to do this. Because every case is different. So that's one of the kind of nuances, but it's a very important nuance in this whole program itself.
Understanding this area was one of the things that we spent some time on before this kickoff of the community outreach. So think of it as 3 buckets, right? So if someone is charged with a crime, the rules for the release of that video are going to follow the evidentiary rules. Okay, they're like every other piece of evidence rule. That's probably, in terms of understanding release policy and timelines, that's probably the easiest, because someone's been charged with a crime, they're entitled to mount a defense and to understand what the evidence is against them. That's pretty clear. The second bucket is when an officer misconduct issue may be in play. And then there are the control measures there of the Attorney General and others. The third area is where someone has been charged with a crime, there isn't an allegation of police misconduct, then the pre-existing statutes of the Freedom of Information Law apply. And they have criteria by which release can occur, or the privacy, and there's a balancing test there. What is the compelling reason to release it to the public versus the privacy interests that need to be maintained? That law exists, those decisions are made on a regular basis. So in my own head, and trying to understand it, I find it useful to put them into those 3 buckets in terms of thinking about when release may or may not occur.
Yes.
In just talking about how the policy will be, right? You said it is divided within the year, the $3,000, which if it is 12 months, $250 is what it will be. Is that correct?
I do not know the specifics on that, but
So if just
go with
just in
that
talking, right?
example.
So you have $3,000, you divide it by 12, that's $250.
A month, yeah.
Is that $250 something that is permanent, that's what it's going to be, or is there a clause, or can it be a clause, that if there's something an officer continuously not putting on their camera, that can be removed from their paycheck that month, or when they are in suspension or whatever, that is removed from their paycheck, or is that something, hey, you're going to get the $250 a month, and therefore you can do whatever?
So this really gets into what they call the collective bargaining process and the disciplinary process of officers. And so therefore, the labor unions work with the Office of Labor Relations, and they come up with a contract. They say, we're going to police pursuant to this agreement with the county and the officers. As a part of that, there'll be specific provisions to talk about discipline, how you discipline, what the rights are to evidence in that disciplinary proceeding. And then it will also say, well, and the commissioner has the ability to do the following things, including suspending somebody, firing somebody. If, God forbid, there's a criminal act by the officer, prosecution can always happen by the district attorney's office. And as I said before, the inspector general can also weigh in on this. So the $3,000, I don't know of any plans to take that away, because there's so many harsher disciplinary processes that can happen to an officer that really either refuses to turn it on or does something else. So that's a part of the process that has been negotiated between the labor unions and the county office.
And has that been already negotiated?
Yes, well that is exactly what, that plan was brought before the legislature, and that was approved.
Okay, so if, there can be a list of things that, hey, you do this, you do that, but attaching that with the camera,
Yeah.
that can be an incentive, right? I mean, once you get used to an extra $250 in your pocket,
Yeah.
I don't think you want to get rid of that just by forgetting to turn on a camera. And if that continues, that means you don't want to turn on the camera. And that, I think, goes further to the other disciplinary actions. And I think that should have been something to talk about before the negotiations with the union. So I think at this point, just like this gentleman is talking about the $3,000, I like to break it down into the week, because that makes more sense for us, for me. And so if there is not anything attached to that for us as taxpayers, because $250 out of my pocket towards my my taxes that I pay is a pretty big deal, right? The administration is talking about sending stimulus. We're actually giving the police a stimulus to make sure that you are protecting us through this system. So what is it, that we have to do? And I don't know if bargaining is over, but I think should be a part of it as far as the disciplinary. And it shouldn't be as an executive order, because whatever happens politically, we're out to dry. So what is it that we can actually have as the legislator can vote on, no matter who's in office, that this still saves? I'm not trying to say to take money away
I
from
would love to propose legislation that would address that. Now, there are political factors in the legislature where certain political groups may be more inclined to vote for that or not, and that's a whole nother issue. But that is something that I would love to codify in a bill and present that and keep you updated as to the progress of that bill. Because again, I see what you're saying. We don't want anything to be rolled back. We fought very hard last summer and before to get these rights, and we don't make sure these rights are not taken away. I understand. But I think the reality of the situation is what Mr. Balboni is describing, in that there are too many eyes now watching, disciplinary processes and other processes that things like before couldn't just be swept under the rug. I'm receiving now quarterly reports that before I did not receive. And so I'm very glad for the progress we made together as a community, one community, and I'm hoping that we continue that progress.
Other question back there?
Yeah.
This is more of not so much a question, but maybe try to clarify. Having worked at the federal level writing policies, when the union negotiates the increase, that's a standard increase. So violation of rules doesn't take away the increase, but penalties under procedural stuff can justify that if they're administrative with pay or without pay. But once the union negotiates, that's done. So you really can't link the two. You have to look at policies and how you address violations of the policy, because that could hurt you ultimately. So I just wanted to try and help you get a better understanding of how it works.
All right, so I adopt your comments in their entirety. He's right. That was a very good statement then. Okay.
Thank you, yes.
May I have executive order form address walk-in, please?
I'm sorry, the
Executive for order form address.
Sure,
Walk-in,
yes.
not the internet, walk-in.
The executive order website address?
No, walk in your office to get it.
Oh, you want to go to the
Yeah.
legislator's office, could you provide
I
it?
will have my staff speak with you, and we can assist you in that now. Yes, ma'am. Yes,
And just to clarify, the executive order was a governor's executive order. It was not an executive order at the county level. It was the governor's executive order that required all police departments across the state to submit a police reform plan. And Nassau County did so. So the Nassau County website, to see all of the activity that has taken place as a result of that state executive order, is what I was referring to earlier. And I'm sure legislator will help you get connected to that question over there.
So I think there was an important question that we didn't really get into, and I think you brought it up. So there's this incentive program to incentivize police officers to wear the body cameras, and I understand that. But what happens when the incentive doesn't work? And let's say, this is probably an extreme example, but why not? Because we're here. If majority of the officers in a particular precinct band together and they decide as a unit not to wear the body cameras, if you want. I don't know if that is possible or whatever, it's just a clarification because I'm not too familiar with the area. What happens then? Because then it seems like the program is kind of like at a stalemate. Do we just not have the body cameras anymore, or?
So you're getting into a very, I should say,
Yeah, it is very
an nitty-gritty of how police departments work. But let me just try to explain it this way. Police departments, no matter where they are paramilitary organizations. In other words, they follow rules. They follow chains of command. They have a commanding officer structure. they have a whole set of disciplinary requirements, that or disciplinary ramifications, should they not follow orders from a commanding officer. So, I mean, I've spent a lot of time working with police organizations. I have never heard of an entire unit saying, we're not doing this. And I think it's because all of them would be disciplined. All of them, and if they really became extreme, I mean, the gentleman in the back, the supervisor, I mean, you could probably answer that better than anybody else.
I can help her out. Usually when we get those guys, you know who they are. Because feedback usually comes from them. And usually they get what I like to call the WWFs.
What's that?
That's basically, we figure out who you are. That's trying to rile up the men, for lack of a better term. And pull you in and just tell you not to get it. We know who you are. Because word usually gets back. Because the majority of officers are good, decent people. They don't want